NGMA friends. A warm welcome to National Gallery of Modern Art, Bengaluru. It takes an immense pleasure for inviting you all for today's evening's talk by Mr. Ganesh Shivaswamy on Raja Ravi Varma, his Imprint in Time, celebrating 125 years of the print legacy. I would now like to call the director, Ms. Nazneen Banu, to come up and introduce the speaker for today's evening and to welcome him on stage.
Well, namaskar, and a very good evening to all of you. First of all, let me extend a very warm welcome to one and all present here this evening for sparing your time and for joining us today for our latest presentation, which marks the 125th year of the print legacy of Raja Ravi Varma, Imprints and Time. And before I introduce our guest speaker, I would like to share a few lines which I read some time back. And it says, "Art belongs to everybody and nobody. Art belongs to all time and no time. Art belongs to those who create it and to those who savor it. Art does not exist for art's sake. It exists for people's sake." And when we say that art exists for people's sake, the one name that comes to my mind is the legendary, the revolutionary Raja Ravi Varma, who made art accessible to a large cross-section of our society through affordable lithographs of his painting. The lithographs not only enhanced his reach and influence as a painter, but also increased the involvement of commoners and masses in the fine arts and thus defined artistic tastes among common people for several decades. Today, as we celebrate 125th year of the print legacy of the legendary artist, we have with us Mr. Ganesh Shivaswamy, our guest speaker this evening, who's not only a saver of art, but a savior as well. Though an advocate by profession, he has taken keen interest and spent almost 3 decades of his life collecting, studying, and structuring the legacy of India's foremost artist, Raja Ravi Varma. Starting from an early age of 13, his collection of oleographs today is considered to be one of India's most substantial and comprehensive collections. He has also assisted research scholars pursuing their doctorate, and his collections has been cited in several scholarly articles and research publications, not only in India, but abroad in countries like US and UK. He has now embarked upon a project of writing a book on Ravi Varma's print legacy. He has conducted several exhibitions on Ravi Varma and the press in past. In January in the year 2016, he conducted an exhibition titled The Reciprocal Influence of Popular Art and Ravi Varma Press in Coimbatore. The exhibition was very well received and also traveled to Pondicherry, where it was inaugurated by the Lieutenant Governor of Pondicherry. He was also closely associated with the National Gallery of Modern Art, Bengaluru, for our past exhibition on oleographs of the Ravi Varma Royal Lithography and Legacy, and not only contributed substantial number of oleographs from his personal collection, but also curated the exhibition, for which we received very encouraging response from our visitors. Mr. Shivaswamy also compiled the first online catalog of oleographs from the Ravi Varma Press as a tribute to Raja Ravi Varma on his centennial death anniversary in the year 2006. And today, he's here with us to talk and give an insight about Raja Ravi Varma, Imprints in Time, celebrating 125th year of the print legacy. With this backdrop, I request everyone to please invite our guest speaker on stage with a huge round of applause.
Thank you, Madam. Well, the task before me today is to encapsulate 125 years in 45 minutes. So I think I better get straight to it. And every good narrative on Ravi Varma begins in Kilimanur. Kilimanur is situated about 40 kilometers north of Trivandrum. And during the time of the Travancore kingdom, it was a very important aristocracy. A number of the consorts of the princesses hailed from this very illustrious family. It was the intellectual hub. It was the artistic cradle of that area. In fact, Kilimanur is the source of two Kathakali plays. One of it is Ravana Vijayam, which was written by Vidwan Kolthambaran, and the other is Kamsavat, which was written by Kilimanur Ravi Varma Thambaran, who lived between 1782 and 1854. Kilimanur itself had this Kathakali troupe with it, so it sponsored Kathakali in a very big way. In the mid-19th century lived a Maharaja called Swadi Thirunal. We all know of him as a very great composer king. But what very few of us know is that it was Swadi Thirunal who introduced into Travancore the modern period of painting. He brought in a whole lot of artists from outside. One of the artists he brought in was a man called Alagiri Naidu from Madurai. And Alagiri Naidu was very proficient in the Tanjore style of painting. Alagiri Naidu in turn taught Ravi Varma's maternal uncle, the gentleman you see on the screen now. This is a painting actually painted by Ravi Varma of his uncle. And I went in search of his paintings, and I was able to find some of Rajaraja Varma. I'm going to refer to him now as the uncle because there are actually two Rajaraja Varmas we're going to encounter today. The uncle's paintings I went in search of, and I found them in the form of murals on a temple wall, the Kilimanur Sasta temple wall. And here is one of the murals. Now, this mural is substantially damaged, but if you look at it, the photographs actually enhanced for this presentation. What you will very quickly notice is that it is very different from a Kerala mural. There are two things which are very different to it. The first thing you'll notice is that the horse, and I presume it has Sasta on it, the horse is in gallop. So you actually have movement now entering the Kerala murals. And if you look at the landscape recedes. So the second thing which you're getting new into Kerala murals is perspective. So both of these new things are brought in through the uncle, Rajaraja Varma. The other intellectual of Kilimanur I introduce you to this evening is Ravi Varma's own mother, Uma Ambathamburati. She wrote the dance script for a Tullal dance called Parvati Swayamvaram. And Ravi Varma, sometime in about 1900, he had this script printed into a limited edition book of 1,000 copies. The book, unfortunately, is all but vanished today. But I was able to get one copy of it. And here's the title card of Parvati Swayamvaram, written by Uma Ambathamburati. So it is into this environment that Ravi Varma is born. That's Kilimanur, and actually the first building which you see over there, right to the very front, that's the Chitralayam which Ravi Varma built. It wasn't there when Ravi Varma was born. So when Ravi Varma was born in 1848, he's born into this atmosphere which has a lot of art and dance, and there's music, and there are people who are writing scripts. So there are three things basically which Ravi Varma imbibes into him. The first thing he imbibes into him is Kathakali. And the second thing he imbibes into him is the tenets of Tanjore painting. The third thing he imbibes into him, and which he's taught, is social norms. Social norms, why? Because in Travancore at that point of time, like any other kingdom in India, it was not a horizontal society. It was a vertical society, where you had to know your place in the system and how you deal with people above you and how to extract graces from people below you. So this is what is happening for the first 14 years when Ravi Varma is in Kilimanur. His first teacher was the uncle. And I also wanted to know whether the uncle actually influenced Ravi Varma in any way. So I go back to the mural which you just saw, and we move forward in time. So what you're seeing on the screen now are three pictures. The one on the extreme left is Rajaraja Varma, the uncle. The painting in the middle is by Ravi Varma, and the one on the right is the oleograph. So if you actually look, it's compositionally exactly similar to the uncle's picture, including, if you are able to very carefully observe, you can even see the umbrella. The umbrella over Sasta is positioned exactly the same way as Ravi Varma would. So Rajaraja Varma, the uncle, clearly influenced Ravi Varma. First 14 years, Ravi Varma is in Kilimanur, and at the time of his Upanayanam, Ravi Varma is taken and presented before the Maharaja, this Maharaja, Ailyam Tirunal. And Ailiyam Thirunal allows Ravi Varma access into his library. And for the first time, Ravi Varma is now beginning to see European art as well. So by this time, you have Ravi Varma imbibing Kathakali, Tanjo, social norms, and European art. And then when Ravi Varma is 18, he's gifted his first box of colors by this gentleman. Kerala Varma, Valiyakul Tambaran, is also known as Kerala Kalidasa because he has translated a number of Kalidasa's works into Malayalam, one of which is Mayura Sandesham. This is 1866. So now Ravi Varma's also got with him the technique of European painting. From 1866 to 1874, very short years, Ravi Varma paints his first known commissioned portrait, and that is this one, Kilakkepalat Krishna Menon. Now, a lot of the biographies till now only have a black and white photograph of this, and I went in search of the painting. I said, if the painting exists, then it must be somewhere. So I was able to find it, believe it or not, 3 weeks ago. So for the very first time ever on display is Ravi Varma's very first painting. And that is Kilakkepalat Krishna Menon. When I first took a look at the painting, I said, my God, all of his training has come through. He's a good student. So let's examine this painting. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this painting. Because we need to realize, understand whether Tanjo painting's been understood, Kathakali's been understood. So let's go step by step. First is Tanjo. The first thing Tanjo painting teaches you is to accommodate all of the figures onto your given space. So spatial accommodation, Ravi Varma gets spot on right from the beginning. This is a very complex portrait. It's 5 people. Ravi Varma paints all of them with no problem. All of them are accommodated onto the canvas. Ravi Varma never had a problem right from the beginning on to the very end, where he started with the face and then realized he didn't have space for the body, so the body becomes smaller. And then he realizes he doesn't have space for the hands, and the hands become even smaller. Ravi Varma never painted hangman pictures, never did, right from the very beginning. Why? Because Tanjo painting is teaching him spatial accommodation. Spatial accommodation is spot on. Coming to the next, that is Kathakali, Tanjo painting also, and social norms. All of these are teaching you hierarchy of placement. In Kathakali, it's on stage. In Tanjo painting, it's on a board. And in social norms, it's in society. It was very important for Ravi Varma to understand hierarchy, and he understood it very well. In Kathakali, the dominant person is to the right of the subservient person, or the dominant person is higher than the subservient person. So to our visual left would always be the dominant person. The servient person would be to our visual right. Now look at the painting. The head of the family is to our extreme visual left, and that is Krishna Menon. In fact, I think Ravi Varma sort of then says his head must be higher than the other people, so he puts in a little kudumi is what I think. But that is how Ravi Varma painted. Everybody else in the picture, if you notice, is either to the extreme, our extreme left, which would be to, you're getting what I'm saying, or below. That is how Ravi Varma did every painting. Starting from here, all the way to the victory of Indrajit, Ravi Varma composed his pictures using the Kathakali placement of figures. Just to drive the point in, if this was done by a European artist, the 2 parents would have been in the middle and you would have had the children around. But that is not Ravi Varma's placement. Ravi Varma's placement is the Kathakali placement. If, for example, Ravi Varma were to paint a picture which had a Rama and a Hanuman, the Hanuman would either be to Rama's left or to our visual right, or would be below Rama. Hanuman would never be placed on Rama's upper right like a teacher in a classroom. That is the Kathakali placement. Moving on, let us also examine the jewelry. 1870. Although beautiful, It's not entirely intricate because Ravi Varma is yet to develop that technique, which comes in very much later. So in 1870, Ravi Varma was still learning jewelry. But what about drapery? Drapery, by this point of time, Ravi Varma is fairly good. Because if you can actually see Krishna Menon's upper cloth, it is diaphanous. And Ravi Varma is able to get that in. Ravi Varma was able to pick in every fold and every crease of every cloth. So this is 1870. Let's move on to 1874, when Ravi Varma paints a painting called the Tamil Lady Playing the Sarabath. This is the copy. What happened to the 1874 painting? Well, the 1874 painting went to Madras and thereafter won a prize and thereafter was gifted to the Prince of Wales, later King Edward. So I said, my God, if it's gone to King Edward, it has to be with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So I did write to her. And then the curator contacted me. And they were never able to find it. So I said, no, the painting's there and this is how it looks and that is how it looks. And they searched high and low and they found it. High, on a stairwell to the attic in St. James's Palace. And I said I wanted it for the lecture. So a man actually climbed up on a ladder and took a photograph of it and sent it to me specifically for the lecture. And for the very first time, 1874 on the later copy. Yes, the painting's been trimmed. So the curator was very happy. He says, oh, we finished with Ganesh. And then a second barrage of emails. Why is it trimmed? He says, I don't know why it's trimmed, Ganesh, but the catalog reads a lady playing a musical instrument. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is Tamil Lady Playing the Sarabath 1, Tamil Lady Playing the Sarabath 2. And why is this painting important? The painting is important because this is the first known copy made by Ravi Varma. It is this continuous demand for copies which goes into the making of the press. Here are a few copies of them. This is Shakuntala, Patra Lekana. These are three which I've put on the screen. I could have put more. There are quite a few of them. And then even very sordid themes, like Sairendri. There are a number of copies of them. Again, the one on the extreme left top becomes an oleograph. And look at the Kathakali placement. Dominant is to the right of the servant and to our visual left. That's the Kathakali placement. So this keeps going on until 1884 when Madhav Rao says, look, you know what you need to do? You need to send your pictures to Europe and have them oleographed. And then he says, you should do it for two reasons. One is it will extend your reputation. And the second, he says, it will do great service to the country. Both of these prophecies would come true in ample measure. But to me, I found the second prophecy very intriguing. Why? Because Madhav Rao was a Marathi Brahmin. He was born in Tanjore. He became the Diwan of Travancore. And he goes on to become the Diwan of Baroda. I ask myself, what was the country he was talking about? The country we know today never existed in 1884, and certainly not to the Diwan, because the Diwan really understood territorial differences. The only interpretation which I can make to it is that here is Madhav Rao infusing into Ravi Varma, look past the end of your nose. Look at the larger picture. And so now we have something new being taught, and that is look at the larger picture. This also goes into Ravi Varma establishing the press, because he is now not content in just painting for commissions. He wants to paint for all, as the learned director said. 1884 to 1890, nothing really happens. And in 1890, Ravi Varma is painting a series of paintings for the Baroda Darbar, quite a few of them. The paintings are first painted in Kilimanur, then they're taken to Trivandrum for an exhibition. And thereafter, they are taken to Bombay, where they're exhibited. And when they're exhibited in Bombay, there's so much of interest in the pictures that they say, and they really force Ravi Varma into making copies of them. Let us look at some of the paintings which go into Baroda. Arjuna and Subhadra, many of these actually do go on to become oleographs. Again, Kathakali placement. The dominant is to our visual left. Bharata and the Lion Cup, The Birth of Krishna, Harish Chandra, Kamsa Maya, Kichaka Sairendri, again the Kathakali placement, dominant is to our visual left. Nala Damayanti, Radha Madhava, Shantanu and Ganga, and in the Shantanu, the dominant is to the visual left because she is ruling that particular episode. Shantanu and Matsyakanda, again the Kathakali placement, and Vishwamitra Menaka, again at that point of time, the Kathakali placement. There were two more pictures, and the biographers say one is Sita Siddhi and the other is the disrobing of Draupadi. So I contacted my friends in Baroda and I said, where are these pictures? They said, no, one of them is not called Sita Siddhi. It's called Sita Shuddhi. I said, why has it not come in any other biography? They said, because no one asked. So here for the very first time, again sent only for this lecture, is the first time you're going to see it in color. Sita Shuddhi. And this is Sita's Panigrahanam at the time of her marriage. And to me, it's absolutely beautiful to see the ages of Rama and Sita, completely illegal today. But they're so absolutely beautiful. You're seeing it in color for the very first time. And then, of course, the disrobing of Draupadi. The disrobing of Draupadi, the Rama Varma version of it has been seen again for the first time. I'm going to keep saying for the first time, so get used to it. For the first time, you will see the disrobing of Draupadi as well. So this is the entire Baroda collection, painted in 1890. And then people go on clamoring after him by saying, look, we want copies of them. But did it actually happen? Was Ravi Varma actually asked to make copies? The answer is yes. And where do you find the source for it? In a newspaper. This is the Hindu, October 15th, 1890, and it says a good suggestion. A correspondent writes, from your yesterday's issue, it would appear the celebrated artist Mr. Ravi Varma Koltambaran has drawn several highly admirable pictures which are intended to adorn the palace of His Highness the Gaikwad of Baroda. It would be very useful if the learned artist would have these pictures photographed and sold at a moderate price, maybe within the reach of all. It's very intriguing to me because by that time photography clearly has already become a mainstay, at least in elite India, because newspapers itself at that point of time was quite elite. So this demand then crystallizes Ravi Varma and he finally says, okay, I have to get my act together. And he deputes his brother. Now with this, Ravi Varma's sort of getting it going slowly tapers off, and then the brother begins. And the brother sends a man called Abdullah Hussain all the way to Germany, and he says, will you please go and get somebody who can set this press up for us? And he goes all the way to Germany, this Abdullah Hussain, and catches hold of a man called Fritz Leischer. And in 1893, signs an agreement with him. This is the very first document which we see towards the establishment of the press, 1893, 16th of June, 1893. And then they get their act together and they say, all right, we're ready to go. And the very first launch takes place with this advertisement. The Ravi Varma Fine Art Lithographic Press. An oleographic press under the above name has been opened in Girgaon, Bombay, the first of its kind in India, for the printing and publication of pictures illustrative of Indian mythology, history, and everyday life. The establishment is worked and managed by skillful and experienced European artists. The well-known Travancore artist Mr. Ravi Varma's charming picture called The Birth of Shakuntala is now ready. And look at the last line. The price of a copy of this picture, which is an excellent oleograph, is ₹6. That's quite expensive, really. So when was The Birth of Shakuntala ready? July 12, 1894. And what is today? July 12, 2019. I invite you all to celebrate with me on the very day of the launch of the first Oleograph. So let's take a look at the birth of Shakuntala. And there they are. The painting is on the left. And the 1894 Oleograph is on the right. Again, Kathakali placement. At this stage, Menaka's dominant. And she goes to our visual left. So there, happy birthday, 125 years. Moving on. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish with the press, and I'm coming back to 1894 a little later. So what happens thereafter? Till 1898, the press is in Girgaon. Then from 1898, it shifts to Ghatkopar because there was a plague and civil unrest. The press actually started as a partnership with Rajaraja Varma and a man called Govardhan Das. So Govardhan Das, he exits the partnership in 1898, and thereafter Rajaraja Varma owns the press as a sole proprietor. Thereafter, in 1899, the press shifts to Malavli, Lonavala, where it finally lands up. And then in 1903, Rajaraja Varma says, I'm selling the press. And he sells it to Fritz Fleischer. And in his diary on 9th of October 1903, the last line, he says, the proprietorship of the press was in my name, though it was called after brother. So, ladies and gentlemen, we need to acknowledge the people who go behind the building of a brand. The Ravi Varma brand was built by Rajaraja Varma as the initial partner and thereafter the sole proprietor. I selected these photographs. They are dull, they are damaged, but to me, it was both the brothers in the very same environment. Both of them are sitting on a very rickety chair. And I believe that the writing Rajaraja Varma, which you see, may be Rajaraja Varma's handwriting himself. So this is the first owner of the press. The next man on the scene is Fritz Fleischer. He's the German man who was brought in 1893. And to me, even before I get into what he does, I wanted to know what kind of a person he was. So I searched and I was able to find that he had built within his compound a beautiful beer cellar to keep his beer cold. So he liked the Oktoberfest, clearly. And then a set of photographs. So there's Fleischer doing the hunt on the right, and then there's Fleischer on top, and he's actually supervising planting of crop or something, so it's a bit of an agrarian. And then you have the house, so he's living in a very well-appointed house. But to me, the greatest information which I got on Fleischer, and for me as a lawyer, I think was the best thing, was through legal records. Fleischer sued for everything. Everything and anything, he filed a case, or he was defending a case. And I was thinking to myself, when I started my legal practice, where was Fleischer? I needed a guy like him. But of course, he was well dead and gone by then. Lots and lots of cases. But there's one case which I'm going to take you through today. And you have to follow the facts closely. I have a few lawyers in the thing, so you'll understand. There was a man called Zimmermann, who was a German employee. And Zimmermann and Fleischer got into a fight. So Fleischer said something, and Zimmermann retorted with bad language. So Fleischer says, leave. Zimmermann says, yes, I'll leave, but I'm going to sue you. And so he does. And what does he do? In the lower court, Zimmermann wins. So Fleischer takes it all the way to the first appellate court. And in the first appellate court, Zimmermann wins. So Fleischer takes bad language all the way up to the Bombay High Court. He says, I'm not letting this go. What does the Bombay High Court say? Well, before we actually get into what the Bombay High Court says, and let's play a little game. I want you to think up of a lovely little bad word. And don't say it, we're an august company this evening. You can choose to be Fleischer, you can choose to be Zimmermann. I mean, for me, my vocabulary in bad language doesn't go beyond I'll hit you or something like that. But that's where it is. So I hope you've got your little bad word in place. And let's see what the High Court says. It says, having regard to the provocation offered, and to the ordinary habits and customs of Europeans in the matter of language of this kind, the retort given by the servant in no way justified the dismissal. The appeal was dismissed with cause. So the High Court says, oh, you Germans, you're used to bad language, so what's the big point? But the thing is that Fleischer doesn't give it up without a fight. But So we know Slicer, he's an Oktoberfest drinking person who is doing shikar and all of that. But what does he do to the press? He turns the press around like nobody else does. Unfortunately, today we do not have any documents from the press of a catalogue. But I have been able to find 2 documents in the course of my research for the book. And these are 2 price lists issued by the distributors. And these price lists have been priceless insofar as compiling the actual gamut of what is the output of the press. And it's prolific. It's huge. The number of things which he's doing is absolutely huge. One of the things which Slicer does at the time when the press is there is he starts embracing other artists also. So in addition to Ravi Varma, there are a number of other simply prolific artists who have now joined the press and their pictures are being printed. So we need to acknowledge them because they also go into building up the Ravi Varma brand. Here are some of them. This is by Mahadev Vishwanath Dhurandhar. Can you believe it that the first substantial book on him has come out only last year? We've not researched him at all. A.M. Mali on the left, Kumbar on the right, we have no clue as to who these people are. The only reason we know that they are there is because Slicer is allowing them to put the imprint of their signature onto the oleograph. And that's how we know that these people actually did contribute to the Ravi Varma press. G.V. Venkatesh Rao. Again, we don't know who he is, but in the process of me irritating the Royal Collection Trust in London, we found that there was a G.V. Venkatesh Rao there also. Navneet Krishna by Sharma Brothers. Siddhalinga Swami on the left, he's a prolific Mysore artist, and he even contributed to the press. C.G. Ramanujam on the right. Then they get into advertisements. And the one on the left is by K. Madhavan. Now, K. Madhavan is an artist to watch out for because Stephen Inglis refers to him as the Norman Rockwell of South India. He came out with a lot of illustrations. We don't know much about him, but a lot of research is being done about the artist on the left. That's to watch out for, K. Madhavan. And then, of course, Dongre Balamaratham. And then he goes into printing books. A very rare book we were able to find. And this is of the Bonesley family, the family tree. And if you look at the pages, I mean, clearly the family is quite populated, very, very intricate. And then into picture postcards, playing cards, and textile labels. And to me, I was able to find one textile label which sort of summarized me also. Because what happens if a lawyer gets into art? He gets labeled. That is actually barrister chap, as in the stamp of approval of the barrister. But then for me, I mean, it's barrister chap. That's clearly not me. So this is the kind of absolutely prolific work which the press is doing under Slicer. But what does it do to his finances? Again, we get back into a legal record. And he executes a will in 1932. He dies in 1935. Again, it goes back into court. And here we do know the kind of money the man has made. He bequeaths the press to Laurie Lotta Slicer, his youngest daughter. And then if you look, he says, by his will dated November 30th, 1932, the deceased inter alia bequeathed the Ravi Varma Fine Art Litho Press with all its machinery to its youngest daughter, the plaintiff. But look at the bottom. Thereafter, he also bequeaths 10,000 should be paid to his daughter Mary Rose, 25,000 to his daughter Lily, and 1 lakh to his daughter Wally, and the remainder to the plaintiff. So his estate is huge. It's in excess of 1,35,000 rupees for 1935. This gives you an idea as to how very successful the press was. It was extremely successful at the time when Slicer was taking care of it. The press continues operation till 1973 and then it burns down. And it's very ironic that I was actually able to find a fire insurance policy taken by Slicer. Unfortunately, of course, it had it had expired in 1902. But in 1973, the press burns down. After that, I do not think any printing activity took place. The very last archival material which I was able to find in relation to the press is this one. And if you look at it, it is the Time Out in Bombay. And this one in the red circle, it says Editorial Office, Ravi Varma Press, Malavli. Then I found a stash of letters where they've sent it out to advertisers. And he's saying, you better advertise with us before your time runs out. Not realizing it's time out for the press. And this is the very last archival material I was able to find in relation to the press. What happens thereafter? It is a very sad story because you have the employees coming in to Robert. Robert by then is managing the press. They say, you have to give us something as a payoff package. Robert says, I'm not giving you the machinery, but you can take the stones. So the stones go on to paving floors, to covering gutters, and in one instance actually paves the floor of a school. And it's very unfortunate because after the floor was paved, the children were not putting their feet on it because there were the imprints of gods there. So they come back to Robert and they say, what a bad idea. And he says, I have a solution. The solution is a solution of nitric acid. And the whole thing's wiped clean. And that's what we've done to our heritage. I was thinking of whether I was going to show you the photograph, and I said, no, I'm not going to show you that photograph. Because thereafter, whatever is left with the press is rescued and is taken into Manipal. And that is where it is today in the Hastashilp Heritage Village. And it was Mr. Vijaynath Shenoy who brought in whatever was left. Now we go back to 1894. So we've seen the birth of Shakuntala, and let us look at what the others were. This is the advertisement issued. So it says the birth of Shakuntala, the first oleographic picture, and then it says the second and third is the Lakshmi and Saraswati, priced at rupees 2 each. So we also know prices now. The Lakshmi and Saraswati, when they were introduced in September of 1894, they were simply revolutionary. Why? They were revolutionary on many, many grounds. But I'm going to restrict my lecture to one of them. I want you all to go back to 1894. And in 1894, if someone came up to you and said, pray to Lakshmi, how would you imagine the deity? The academic class of society would be described the Dhyana Shlokam and said, she's sitting in Padmasanam and she's got Chaturbuja, she's got Kamalas in 2 hands, she's got Abhay and Varada, and she has 2 gajas. If you really didn't understand that, then the only visual assistance was something like this. This is from the Sri Tattvanidhi. It was illustrative. Tanjore painting, Mysore painting, all of these 2-dimensional, illustrative of a concept. The other thing which the academic class of society would have been taught is that the Lord resides in geometry, as in the Sri Chakram. No one really understood that. But this was the academic class of society. What happened to the common man? The common man was not given access to temples. And access to temples happens in 1936 with the Temple Entry Proclamation. It starts with the opening up of roads in Vaikyam. And thereafter it results in the Temple Entry Proclamation. Until 1936, injunctions against religious access were very strong and intense. And much earlier, 1894, this woman gate crashes the whole thing. That's why she's important. That's why she's very important. Because she breaks every religious injunction barrier and she percolates herself into every home. That is why she's important. The second reason why she's important, the Bible says God created man in his own image, but man created God in his image here. For the first time, she's actually a human being. But who is she? Who is the girl who goes on to becoming Brand Lakshmi? Let's sort of do with this one on the models. Sugandha from Rangrasiya did not exist. Fact or fiction now I'm going to do. Complete fiction. Sugandha from Rangrasiya did not exist. This girl is Anjanabai Malpekar. She did exist. She was a prolific musician. She sets up the Bendi Bazaar Gharana. She's from Goa. She is a Kalavant. She's a very strong woman. But she met Ravi Varma only 6 years before he died, in 1900. So no painting prior to 1900 can be attributed to Anjanabai Malpekar. Not the Lakshmi, not the Saraswati, not the Mohini, not any painting which went to the Chicago. Because Ravi Varma met her only in 1900. But there was another girl. And she was very active in 1893-94. And this is the girl. And in the photograph, you actually see written at the bottom, Rajibai of Bombay, our model. Now, Ravi Varma's work was actually being followed by a man called Bala Sahib, who was the Prince of Aund. And in his autobiography, he speaks of a model. And he actually says, I'm only reading the last few lines. It says, and this is from Rupika's book. He says, the lady's, she was very beautiful, is what he says. The lady's face, body, and clothes are seen in several paintings, especially of Lakshmi and Saraswati. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time is Rajibai posing for Lakshmi. She is the lady behind brand Lakshmi. And she is the one who raised a lot of curiosity with the NGMA invitation, because a lot of people kept asking, who is she? Who is she? I said, come, take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, Rajibai Mulgaonkar. 125 years later, I lift the veil to show you Rajibai Mulgaonkar posing for Lakshmi. And there she is. Ravi Varma did use photographs. And just to drive the point home, here is one example of Raja Lakshman Das, and that's the photograph and that's the painting. The next oleograph is Saraswati. Now, Saraswati is where I would like to explain the process of lithography. And these are some of the litho stones I was able to get. The one in the middle is the master stone. And if you see every little intricate thing there, between each line was a shade. And each of the stones which you see on the sides represented one color. So a lithograph, a chromolithograph would actually require you several prints of different colors for you to get the final. And here is a 7-color oleograph. So this is the entire series. But it's difficult to understand, so I sort of did a video of it. And this is the first, which will be the flesh. Then comes ochre. Then black is added. This is the composite of 3. Then pink or rose is added. Then you get 4. Then red gets added. It becomes 5. Blue gets added. Sorry, it becomes 6. And then you have blue or gray. And you have the final. So it was a very complex method of printing. It wasn't, put it into the computer and then say you have 1,000 copies and walk away. It never happened like that. So this is how oleographs were actually printed. But what did oleographs do to all of us? One, it was completely revolutionary. Completely changed the aesthetic. It changed our perceptions of the divine. It changed our perceptions of normal aesthetics. It changed commercials. It changed comic culture. Changed cinema. Changed so many things. But I can't go into all of that today. So I decided I'm going to take the very witty ones. And what Ravi Varma's press does is it breaks the mold and it creates a new mold. And it is the new mold which we've still not been able to break away from today. So I had to quote Alfred Lord Tennyson, the old order changeth yielding place to new, and God fulfills himself in many ways. So let's look at some of the ways in which God fulfills himself. Quirky. So if Lakshmi and Saraswati has to be that beautiful, she has to be using Vinolea soap. And how else can she get a complexion like that? And then, of course, Vishnu says, come on, Sridevi and Bhudevi, let's go with Garuda. And I have a new avatar. What's the avatar? To sell strawberry and apricot jam for C.E. Morton. And then the one on the right. I mean, if a blue Krishna could be scrubbed so clean and made fair, it has to be soap. It simply had to be. I mean, there's no other explanation to it, right? But these are doing very well. But the other thing which the oleographs are doing is it's actually influencing a whole range of new artists who are carrying on not only the print tradition, but the popular art tradition. And we, as Indians, we've completely forgotten that legacy. And so I intend to show you some of them today. This is a painting by V.V. Sapar and is clearly influenced by Ravi Varma's Rama vanquishing the ocean. The ones on the right are paintings, mind you. The one on the left is a painting by Indra Sharma, influenced again by Ravi Varma's. And then the Madhavan, this Norman Rockwell, that chap, and his influence from Ravi Varma's Shankar. But it doesn't remain with just India. It goes way beyond. And look at some of the match labels. Made in Sweden, made in Czechoslovakia, made in Japan, and the Krishnas made in Austria. So clearly Ravi Varma has done something where he creates not only a revolutionary image, he creates such an acceptable image that it goes all the way everywhere, and then everyone's now making matchboxes and this and that, mostly for Indian consumption, but then they're adding their own little bits to it, as you will see in this slide. You actually notice what's happened. So the one on the right is made in Japan, and now Menaka's got mongoloid eyes, and Vishwamitra's hair is like a Buddha, it's curled. So they've taken these images, they made it their own, and they've sort of sent it out. So acceptable. So it's revolutionary, and then it's acceptable. Where Ravi Varma's press imagery, which brings me to the last slide for the evening. And that is this one. I'm going to spend some time on this. I was walking one day in Madurai to this temple, Alagar Kovil near Madurai, and I looked up at the Gopuram and I said, what? There was the birth of Shakuntala. So I ran back in, and the first thing I asked him was, when was the Gopuram built? This is 30 years ago. I said, what image is that? Sir, Ravi Varma. I said, oh. And then I wanted to sort of continue the cross-examination with him, but I don't think the guy was too interested. But I'm going to take you through these three images. Look at the image on the right. That's the one we're celebrating 125 for today. But just understand what's happening there. Shakuntala has been born because of irresponsibility and immorality. And then Shakuntala is handing over the child to the father. And he says, no, I'm not going to take the child. In Ravi Varma's print imagery, I think this is probably the most inhumane picture you can come across. Because here's an innocent child, and they're playing tennis with her. One's throwing it, and the other's retorting it back by saying, no, I don't want. And it smacks of everything which is immoral, inhumane, irresponsible, and downright cruel. What did the child do? The child didn't do anything in the whole thing. But it gets perched onto a religious podium. How does that happen? So if you think about it, Ravi Varma's press imagery starts from becoming revolutionary. Over the course of time, becomes very acceptable. And even further down the line, even something as sordid as this gets sanctified. And then goes full circle and goes back into a religious place. And it is these three things, revolution, acceptability, and sanctification, which is what creates an imprint in our minds and in time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ganesh. Now we are opening the floor for question and answer. We have 10 minutes, so we wouldn't be able to take all the questions, but for 10 minutes we'll take whatever is possible.
Hello. Hi, sir. I would like to know if where we can find the content of this whole lecture and everything. Is it accessible online somewhere or some?
No. This will not be accessible online.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm interested in knowing more and
You may contact it. You may contact the NGMA.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Anybody else? I mean, my lecture could not have been so clear that there are no questions. Oh, there's one there.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So I have a question with regard to the whole lithographic process. Something that I was noticing while you were sharing all these, comparative images is that, and I've noticed this before about lithographs, but the color palette within lithos are very similar, right? So the aesthetic of the color, like the tonality of the color, the saturation level of the colors that are used in lithos are very specific. So, I mean, just as a personal commentary on an artistic level, how do you feel that kind of affects the image itself? Because there are some paintings where the tones are so different from the lithos.
See, the
colors.
apples and oranges, because the painting is an entirely different medium and the oleograph is an entirely different medium. So really you can't get both of them exactly similar, especially when you're mass producing them on such a scale. So you must understand that the paintings chartered down a different path, and that was completely different from what the oleographs were doing. The oleographs set out on a journey to democratize art. So to some extent, so if you look at the very early oleographs, which were by the Fine Art Lithographic Press, they were actually like wash colors. But very much later, when Schleicher takes it on, one of the ways in which he improves his commercials is to use something called a stippling effect. So what they used to do is they used to hammer little holes into it and the ink would penetrate in. So he was able to get more impressions out of a single stone. That is one of the ways. So the later oleographs you can clearly make out, if you look very close, it's like pointillism. It's tiny little dots which go into making a larger picture, which you'll not find in the first oleographs. The first few oleographs did not retain too much of ink. So in the process of which, maybe about 200, 300 impressions, the stone had to be redone, but not with the later ones. And that's how he sort of achieved commercial success. Schleicher achieved this. Somebody told me from Chitrakala Parishad and actually explained how that happened.
So, in a way, he was kind of the first artist to commercialize the image of God, images of God. So he must have faced a lot of flack from society. So how did he handle the entire?
I don't think he really cared about it, but he did face a lot of opposition. Not only were critics writing by saying, oh, these are so democratic. How do you call them art? Sister Nivedita actually, she criticizes the Shakuntala by saying, here is a woman lying on grass, and this is a picture found in every home. So I was really wondering which of the two she was more upset about. But if you think about it from that point of view, when the criticism was being made, we were living in a different time where there were certain things which were taken for granted. For instance, in 1894-ish, monarchies were the rule, and democracies were the exception. Wealth concentration with the few was the rule. Spreading out wealth was a very much later concept. Religion for a few was the rule. Opening it up was not known at that point of time. I mean, even if you take something as simple as, you go on a road and you can get a biryani. In 1894, a pulao or a biryani was an exotic dish. Even ghee was an exotic thing. So all of a sudden, when you had art proliferating into every home, they just didn't know how to handle it. So they simply said, this is not art. But the reality is that these were all revolutionary. They broke so many barriers. And Ravi Varma, I think, did it. Ravi Varma, there were other presses which also were established. Chitrashala, Chitrapriya Prakash Press was there. The Calcutta Art Studio was there. And these were all doing well. But none of them branded themselves the way in which the Ravi Varma Press did. And so that's why today there's actually a lot of confusion. Practically everything's a Ravi Varma. Is because the branding was so good. Branding was very good.
May I?
Yes.
First of all, congratulations and thank you. This is an absolutely remarkable story to be taken through. My question was basically about print runs.
Sorry?
Print runs.
Yes.
In terms of quantities, in terms of numbers.
Yes.
Obviously, these weren't limited editions.
No,
But
they
say,
weren't.
for example, everybody's favorite Lakshmi. How many would have been printed?
So,
A year or over a period of time before the plates were either destroyed, or did that happen at all?
I don't think, firstly there were stones. I don't think the stones were not destroyed. The stones could be reused over and over again. I was able to find one purchase order. So it's one purchase order, but then there you have. I think it said placed an order for Tilotama 6, Urvashi 6, and Lakshmi 3000. So, I mean, if that sort of gives you an idea as to what was being favored. This also helps us tell us which are the rare ones. Because the Lakshmi and all of these were not too rare, but the Tilotamas and Urvashis and all became extremely rare in course of time because a lot got destroyed as well.
Since every household has one of the prints of Raja Ravi or Ravi Varma in the recent times, how is it that they managed to keep the same similar features? The similarity is so same even after so many years. How is it possible?
See, the prints stopped in 1973. So what we have today are all the things which were printed only at that point of time. So the later prints have all been derivative of the original theme by different presses and different artists. But in those days, at the time when the Ravi Varma press was functional, they had a system called the progressive proof. So what they did was they printed the series of colors and then they printed all of them onto a single sheet. And on the side, you would have all the colors in the form of an index. So what they used to do is every new print run was compared to the progress proof. So in that way, they sort of maintained some amount of quality. The fact remains is the earlier oleographs, the quality is very well maintained. But the later oleographs start sort of going this way and that way because either there's no comparison going on or they're trying to extract a lot more out of the stone, which the stone was not in a position to actually do. So the later you get a lot of blurs and all that, but the earlier ones are very good. But how they maintain the same stereotype was using the progressive proof.
Signature of Ravi Varma on the oleographs in comparison to the paintings, because there's so many paintings these days being called as Ravi Varma with no signature.
So if you look at the gamut of Ravi Varma's work as a painter versus the ones which get printed, you can actually make out that he excluded some paintings which never became oleographs. One is, I think they went by what would be popular and what would be acceptable. So there are actually, I was able to find a very rare painting of Vishnu Maya, of Shiva and Mohini in embrace. It never went on to becoming an oleograph. But we see the previous Mohini, so it stops there. So there was a lot of filtration which actually took place as to what paintings went into becoming oleographs and what paintings did not become oleographs. Clearly the portraits did not become, except very rare ones of political leaders or something like that. Like the one which you saw over here, which was Govardhan Lalji, who was the Tilkayat of Nathdwara. So he was a very important man. Those portraits got done, but normal portraits did not happen. Mythological certainly happened because everyone loved the mythology. Gods and goddesses certainly happened. And of course, the beautiful women, everybody loved them. So those went on to becoming oleographs. But some of the paintings which were very personal did not become. The signature is interesting. I was able to find that they had a separate stamp. So you have the stones, and they had separate stamps with Ravi Varma, Dhurandhar, Mali, all of these people. So there's a box full of them. And over the course of time, some got printed with others. Yes, so there is one painting of Krishna and Yashoda. You know the one where he got scrubbed, the blue color? Yeah, so that is actually by Ravi Varma. But when the oleograph comes out in the Ravi Varma press, it's signed by Dhurandhar. So I think there was I don't think all of them read the instruction book very clearly. There's a lot of that which happens. So unless you're able to correlate it to a Ravi Varma style or correlate it to a Ravi Varma original painting, it's actually difficult to tell you insofar as some of the unsigned works as to who painted each of these oleographs. Yes?
Yeah, hi. Do you think there was a certain whitewashing in Varma's works, especially in terms of skin color? And do you think that was intentional or just something that he might have taken from European paintings?
You see, that's an interesting question. Whitewashing is a criticism, if it is a criticism. Okay, I'll answer it this way. If whitewashing is a criticism, it is a criticism which cannot be levied only against Ravi Varma. Why? Because Ravi Varma followed some of the descriptions, especially that in Vishnu Dharmotara. And in Vishnu Dharmotara, there were already things that she's fair, she's pink, she's this way, she's that way. For instance, Shiva, the Dhyana Shlokam says, Spatika Maninibam Parvatisham Namami. So there are already descriptions found in the earlier scriptures saying Shiva is fair. So you can't attribute that to Ravi Varma, who followed the very same scriptural thing to make a painting. This is one. Two, did Ravi Varma paint only fair people? No. He painted a number of dark people also, especially when it came to portraits. So he was very particular that the tonality of that particular complexion was maintained. A number of paintings by Ravi Varma of dark people do exist. His own wife was very dark. So if Ravi Varma was painting a portrait, he would follow the tonality or the skin complexion of the person. But if he was painting for an oleograph, or if a painting of his was used for an oleograph, in that particular case, he would simply follow what was generally acceptable or what was found in the scripture. There is one very interesting note. When Ravi Varma painted the Sita Swayamvaram or the Rama breaking the bow for Mysore, there's actually a letter written by Ravi Varma to the secretary of the Maharaja of Mysore saying, even before I embark on it, do you want your Rama painted fair or dark? He asks. So when he painted specifically for a particular patron, he asked. There is a sketch actually of the Rama in a dark complexion. But finally, of course, the painting is fair. So clearly somewhere an instruction came in by saying painted fair. Ravi Varma would have just done it. So I don't think you can attribute whitewashing to Ravi Varma. And if you attribute it to him, you'll attribute it to the whole system.
So I think...
Oh, there's one more there.
Hi, Ganesh. So during this printmaking, did the costume colors get changed from one batch of the print to another? Because I recollect seeing Ahalya, I think, at Delhi NGMA in a kind of off-white sari, the one lady on the swing. And at other places, I've seen the same with different colors.
Yes, not only did Ravi Varma change, not only did the printing process change some of the colors from the painting to the print, but also between print runs, we do see change of colors. But there's something which we have to be careful about, is because we do not know today, because there's been a lot of discoloration of the paper. We do not know as to whether the original print would have been cream, white, something like that. So it's actually a little difficult to say how accurate the colors were, because the oleographs as we see them today are substantially dark because of the paper, not because of the paper and because of the varnish layer on top.
Of the temple architecture versus the painting, I noticed that the artist maintained the dominance of Menaka in that particular incident in the painting, but in the sculpture it had been purged.
Yes, because the sculpture is not by Ravi Varma. The painting.
Concept,
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a purging to decrease the importance of Menaka.
I don't see the problem. I'll tell you is no one's understanding Ravi Varma and the Kathakali placement. So everyone thinks anything can go everywhere. No, Ravi Varma did not do that. Ravi Varma was very careful as to who went where in a particular canvas, because he understood hierarchy. In fact, he made such a faux pas with Vishakam Tirunal on hierarchy that he almost got declared persona non grata and he had to leave. So hierarchy at that point of time was very, very important. So Ravi Varma ensured that on his canvases they were there. But then later derivations of people using sculptures and misplacing things, I mean, clearly not Ravi Varma. But Ravi Varma's was always a Kathakali placement.
So I think we have come to the end of the
Thank you.
talk. So firstly, I'd like to call the Director, National Gallery of Modern Art, Ms. Nazneen Banu, to thank Mr. Ganesh for being here and delivering this wonderful talk and giving a lot of insight on Ravi Varma.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
So, on behalf of National Gallery of Modern Art, Government of India, Ministry of Culture, I firstly thank Mr. Ganesh, thank the director for being here with us for the talk, and I thank one and all for being here. Warm evening. And also I would request all of you to kindly follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and we are also on YouTube for the videos which you have missed the event to look up on our YouTube page. Thanks one and all, and warm evening.